Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this discussion. I'm very excited to be moderating this panel. My name is John Flatten. I'm the Executive Director at the Chicago Innovation Exchange at the University of Chicago. We have an esteemed panel up here, top flight experts that will talk about energy storage, solar, urban energy policy, entrepreneurship, innovation, all aspects to a burgeoning ecosystem around transformational and disruptive technologies that Howard talked about and wrote about in his white paper. I'm particularly fortunate to be joined by this group because the practitioners in different parts of that ecosystem. You know, Howard having a lot of focus in policy, with Cynthia focused on sustainability with large institutions, particularly here at the University of Illinois Chicago. And then, of course, with Saeed having a background in entrepreneurship, innovation, and product development. These are all necessary components to a robust, transformative platform that hopefully will be translatable into new technologies that result in cheaper energy, better products, greater mobility across the urban landscape, and ideally leading to smart cities, better resource allocation, and all the kinds of good things that you hope to see as you implement these new types of technologies. As I focus around where my energies have been in the last several years, it's been in technology development and entrepreneurship. So like Saeed, I've spent my career in trying to bring complex technologies to the marketplace. And a big component of that is being a robust ecosystem, and of course backed by market demand. People needing new products and willing to pay for the output of those goods and services. And the kind of environment that we're witnessing now in Chicago, I think is pretty exciting to watch. We're seeing, of course, we have our large industry players that are here. The Chicago and Illinois economy is quite broad-based. It is not dominated by any one particular industry. In fact, the largest industry makes up only 14% of our overall GDP, if you will. And that's good. It's a balanced economy. We've historically been more focused on large industry, as we know. But over the past several years, we're transforming into an innovation global city. And that's focused not only in energy, but in healthcare, in digital tech, and the convergence of all these technologies as well. I'm seeing firsthand at Chicago Innovation Exchange, where our focus is helping the University of Chicago, Argonne, Fermilab employees commercialize innovation through venture creation or licensing activities by helping translate great ideas into commercializable products. I'm watching a new up-and-coming group of leaders that are very interested in being empowered and around entrepreneurship to bring new ideas to the marketplace. I see faculty more interested in commercializing innovation, but needing to find the ways to do that, needing to connect to the marketplace and understand how you go from a good idea to translating that into a product that helps and makes scalable impact on society. So it's a very interesting time. It's a transformative time in many respects. One of the topics that the paper really drills in deeply around is disruptive technologies. There's a lot of analogies that Howard lays out that I'm interested in getting into during this discussion to what's happened with cell phone technologies and how rapidly that's transformed the way people work, the way people buy things, and you name it, healthcare, all of those things are being transformed in a very rapid fashion by the digitization of technologies. Will we see the same types of things in energy? And is Chicago a good place for this type of activity to occur? My argument is absolutely. And I think we're at the tip of the spear. I think we're at the head of the pack at the moment, but it's a rapidly evolving picture wherein we need to work swiftly and we need to be in a supportive mode to be able to help all aspects of the ecosystem develop, to be able to bring new products to the marketplace and secure Chicago and Illinois' place as a place that has a competitive advantage in the clean tech industry. If we say that in many respects, Silicon Valley has arisen and focused around digital tech on one coast, and Boston and Kendall Square focused in not only digital tech but in biotech. Is Chicago's place clean tech? Is that our competitive advantage? Is that where we're unique? Is that our opportunity to transform markets and deliver new products out to the field? And what we're going to explore during the conversation and the discussion will be, what are the barriers to that? Are we making sure that access is available to all participants in the marketplace? What are the things that are required to be able to bring these good ideas to the marketplace? Are they too costly? If not, how will we deliver them? How will we scale these technologies? And so this panel will interrogate some of those questions. The format of today's session will be each person will be given 6 minutes to just give a background on themselves, their area of focus, some of their experiences, and just some forward-looking comments to set the stage for a conversation that will follow for roughly 20 minutes thereafter. We'll open up the floor for questions from the audience, and my goal as a moderator is to keep it a balanced conversation, try to hit on a number of topics that were explored in the paper. I will say that the paper focused in many respects around solar, in particular, and energy storage. The topic of this conversation can be broader than that. That doesn't only need to include those technologies when it comes to clean tech. But the concepts and the precepts are really well laid out in the paper by Howard. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Howard. You can set the stage, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, John. We are on the cusp of a rapidly accelerating quiet revolution in renewable energy, battery storage, and energy efficiency that will fundamentally change the electricity sector as much as wireless telecommunications has changed the way people live, people work, businesses do business, and we function in our homes. 20 years ago, in people's homes, you had a landline phone, a wire, a phone jack, and you connected to the wires and poles and alleys. A couple early adopters, Saeed over there, probably had a cell phone at the beginning.
Yeah, right.
Today, almost everybody in this room has a smartphone or a cell phone. 93% of the public does. That phone enables you not to just make a phone call, but take photographs, send an email around the world instantaneously, do quadratic equations, and all sorts of other things that my kids do that I probably don't do on my smartphone. 94% of Americans have them. The number of landline phones is going down dramatically. And almost everybody in this room has a laptop or a tablet, a smartphone, a router, a Wi-Fi connection to a cell tower by which they do their computing, do their communications, and do much of their work often at home and at the neighborhood coffee house, as well as at the universities. Smart policies are driving new energy markets, and they spur clean energy technological innovations that, if developed and deployed here, can be transferred globally and can help save the world by making energy more affordable, more reliable, and reducing pollution that causes climate change. And what I'm referring to here are solar energy technologies with battery storage, LED lighting and more energy efficiency technologies, and energy management technologies that, when put together, as John mentioned, are as disruptive and potentially destructive to the current electric utility sector as wireless has been to telecommunications. And what we're talking about is technology and policy, opening up markets, spurring more competition and choices, removing regulatory barriers, and nudging and incenting capital investment in clean technologies. So just think about this for a minute. The head of the Environmental Law and Policy Center, the green guy, is talking about more competition, removing regulatory barriers, technological innovation. It sort of sounds like a Republican, right? But this is a rapid transformation, and we're going to see people and homes and businesses bypass the traditional electric utility system, in part or entirely, in the same way that people today, some of you have a landline, many of you don't, and are relying entirely on cell phones. And these changes are moving fast. If you go back to the time, the internet's only 26 years old. Cell phone technology has accelerated in the last 20 years. AT&T predicted that cell phone market penetration would go like that. In fact, what happened with cell phones, digital cameras, and so many technologies we know, is it was a curve that went like this. It was a hockey stick. You hit an inflection point and things rapidly accelerated and moved quickly. The focal point of this conference has been on the social contract. In the utility and energy context, Ross Hempel and I refer that as being the regulatory compact. And I'm not here to say regulatory compact, which is the social contract in the energy context, good or bad. What's happening is technological improvements are accelerating so fast, we need to develop new models for the market of the future. You can't put technology back in the farm. There's almost no historical examples of technological innovation somehow being stopped and put back into the can. 3 very quick points. Solar panels have now dropped from about $4 a watt to 70 cents a watt. And the installation costs when you're doing more go down like that, removing barriers to it. LED lighting right now is likely to come in, and according to Navigant and the Department of Energy, constitute about 70 to 75% of all bulbs. LED lighting is about 85% more efficient than incandescent bulbs. We ran the numbers for Chicago, John Paul Jewell, Jesse Buxbaum, and me. LED lighting alone reduces demand by 7.5%. That's enormous. Solar plus battery storage enables a much more decentralized system. These are the sorts of rapid changes we're seeing. The current electric utility Commonwealth Edison does have a role, and we'll talk a little bit later about how do you deal with backup and network support so the system stays reliable.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Cynthia Kleinman. I'm with the Office of Sustainability here at UIC, so I just like to welcome you if you're not from UIC to our campus. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and what I do, and then we'll get into how that might relate to the topics of the day. Our office basically advances our climate commitment. We have a climate commitment on campus to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. And in that role that I have, we are looking, particularly at energy. 80% of our buildings, 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions are from our buildings, which is basically the heating and cooling systems and the electrical systems in the building. And we do this through energy efficiency, conservation campaigns, education, and renewable energy. And so there's a lot of coordination and outreach. There's the people element, which is a very big piece of this, and I'll come back to that often. Currently, I'm also working on we have a grant that's funded by the Illinois Sustainable Energy Innovation Foundation for smart grid education. And we're trying to use a particular approach, an assets-based community development approach, where we really build on the community members' knowledge, interests, and their values in order to engage them in this thing that's smart grid, that's kind of elusive to most people. Most people, when we ask them if they've ever heard of smart grid, don't know what smart grid is. And so then we work with that. We try to work within existing infrastructures that engage people in various ways, whether it's in community partnerships with groups that are working on housing initiatives or helping people to sort of learn home economics and how to run a household. And these are in hard-to-reach communities. And then on the other thing on campus that we have been doing for the past 7 years, 8 years since I've been in this position, is a metering project. As an institution, our buildings are basically, most of them come in on one energy bill. But if we're looking to do energy efficiency, we need to break that down at the building level to understand what the savings are going to be at each building and be able to measure and verify that those interventions or retrofits are actually working for us. And so we have to meter, and we made the wise choice of using essentially a smart meter in all these buildings so we could read the meters remotely, just to send guys out and around campus once a month to read the meters. Often mistakes were made or they couldn't get out on the right day. Now we can just, every 15 minutes, we know what's happening. And of course, that has implications then for engaging people in energy efficient or conservation activities, because if we can show them what's happening in a building and what happens perhaps, as my boss says, if everyone turned off their coffee makers for a day. Some departments have 3, just what the impact would be, so people could begin to get a sense of, yes, they do have a way to take small steps to make big changes. So those are just a few examples of what we're doing, and I'll chime in on other things as we go through our discussion.
Well, thank you. So I'm the other side. I was a research professor at IIT, and I've been at UIC for the last 4 years in chemical engineering. I wrote a book on renewable energy integration, and I teach that part-time. But for the last 5 years, I followed Howard's advice 10 years ago. He said, if you believe in it, do it, right? So we actually started a project 20 years ago with the Military Army Research Office, and looking at, probably you guys seen the movies, soldiers some years ago used to carry food, ammunition, and water. Today, if you look at them, half of what they carry is batteries, because they have all these electronics that without them, actually, they're out of touch. And some of them are so valuable that communication with them and those electronics is actually the most important thing. So I remember I came from Jordan 20 years ago, so that's about immigration, to do my PhD at IIT. And I got into this project, and this head of special ops box, and it said, put us in a room at 800, I knew what the hell does that mean at the time. And he said, your mission is simple. We have this box that runs these soldiers. They are special out there, invaluable, for 1 day. We just need you for the same box to run it for 3 days. Right? So one smart ass said, it was going to be expensive. And he looked at him and said, son, have you worked with the U.S. Army? Money's not an object, right? So imagine being in a program where he tells you all you need is to triple, right, the energy. Well, there's one problem. I've been in this field for 30 years. So if you look at the energy storage of batteries, the lead acid battery, actually the first car driven was an electric car. The internal combustion came and killed the electric car because batteries were heavy, did not last long, and they were expensive. Fast forward 100 years, batteries are heavy, they don't last long, and they're expensive. So we've been trying to solve that problem for 100 years, and this guy wanted us to solve it in 5 years with $10 million, which he thinks a lot of money. But what happened at the time, the market force, if you look at what happened to Moore's Law with semiconductor, it was going exponentially. You know about chips doubling every 6 months. Well, batteries could not catch up with it, and that for companies like Sony and Panasonic means they could not sell those personal electronics you have in your hand fast enough. So they said, screw it with your battery guy, we're going to do it. So Sony actually came up with the first battery in 92, so they can sell those electronics, and that's the battery we actually took to the military. Fast forward 10 years later, that brought us Tesla. You guys probably know Tesla, right? So Tesla, I know the founder, Martin Eberhard. We were at a conference in Chicago 10 years ago. And Tesla, by the way, did not invent the electric car. They took it from Lotus, the motors, everything, but what they invented was the battery. The guys who founded Tesla took these small batteries that you have in your laptop that revolutionized the electronics industry and put 7,000 of them safely in a car. And the rest is history, right? Today, how many of you heard of Tesla's Powerwall, right? Battery to home? Everybody knows that, right? That's what Howard is talking about. So you take electricity, you store it in the car, so you have an electric car, right? It's so cool. Then you can use that same battery, same technology, at your home. So when you look at electricity regulation in California and the East Coast, if you consume electricity at noon, it's 3-4 times at night. Right? Time of use. So if I have a technology, I have my solar, I can decide when to store with smart technology without being at home. Looks at the grid, what the price, I can sell to the grid, or I can store it at night. I decide when and where to buy it. So imagine if you have that. Now that's in one home. That's what Tesla's thinking. But Tesla had just invested more than $100 million in Buffalo, where my wife is, to open project for actually manufacturing solar panels for another company called Solar City, who's going to take solar panels, batteries, put in every house in California. So with the Internet of Things, with the IT that Howard described, so with the push of a button, actually without anything software, they have at their disposal gigawatts worth of energy that they can consume or deploy at any minute. So imagine that you have now a virtual utility. That's what Howard's talking about, the disruptive nature, and that's what witnesses, which it was enabled by solar and energy storage. And we can chat more about that, but that's the exciting part that we're in today.
So you mentioned Moore's Law. If we think about that and now try to transpose that into clean tech and energy storage for that matter, Howard, you make some bold statements. They're dramatic visions of the future, and it's coming quickly based on the statements that you've made in your paper. When we maybe drill down a little bit further on that, can you talk about some of the similarities that you have observed in the predecessor technologies, but also maybe thinking about what were the breakthroughs that end up making the use and uptake of those technologies, smartphones, as we pointed out, go to that trajectory that you've talked about. Was cost a factor? Even just understanding the technology, automation, it got easy to use. So do you think those features are present in energy and clean tech?
Let's look at what's happening today from just a data-driven standpoint. Okay? LED light bulbs are coming rapidly into the market. Almost all the technical analysis says 70 to 75% of the bulbs within the next 5 to 10 years will be LEDs. LEDs are 85% more efficient than incandescent bulbs. And they're not complicated. They screw in, they screw out. They come in different color palettes and so forth. IKEA just announced all they're going to sell will be LEDs as of January. GE, Philips, and others have switched almost entirely to marketing LEDs. So the entire market is shifting to LEDs. And the fact is, if you look at what those market penetration rates due to demand in the Chicago area, we run the math in the paper. It reduces demand by about 7.5%. That's just one technological improvement. I'm not talking about pumps and motors and air conditioners and refrigerator efficiencies and everything else. One technological improvement, 7.5%. And this is easy. You're beginning now to see, as Saeed mentioned, energy management technologies that used to be complicated and today are getting simpler and simpler. They can be done from your smartphone. When you're on an airplane, and say you got another 2.5 hours on the flight, and your laptop says you have 1 hour of power. You hit something called power saver mode or power management. Do any of you really know what that does? I don't have a clue, okay? But what it does is all of a sudden, instead of saying I have 1 hour, it says I have 2 or 2.5 hours. It's really simple. And I think what it probably does is the screen may be a little dimmer, and the processing speed, which doesn't matter because I'm typing documents, not running complicated programs, slows down a little bit. But all of a sudden, doing something very simple. So what happened on smartphones and cell phones is that with volume, the price came down. The software for it to work I used to laugh, you have to go ask a kid to do it for you. It's now really pretty simple now. You can figure out how to do an email, you can figure out how to make a phone call, you can figure out how to send a photograph. Most of the functions on your smartphone are better and better. People here use Uber, real easy interface, right? Here's where I want to go. You hit a button, it tells you if somebody's coming. You can hit a button and ask how much will it cost. The interface is simple. We're seeing that on energy management systems, where you're beginning to get something where you can hit security mode. I'm out of town for 2 days, so that the heating and cooling adjust. So it's a combination of ease and simplicity. It's a price coming down, which we're seeing happen in a radical way on solar panels, on energy efficiency devices. We're seeing battery storage technologically improve tremendously, as Saeed's talking about. The efficiency of solar panels are going up about a percentage point to 1.5 points per year. So it's that combination coming together. And when that all comes together, price goes down, quality and efficiencies go up, and ease and simplicity begin to take hold. That's when things take off. And we've seen that in digital cameras, we've seen that in smartphones. I mean, digital cameras used to be really expensive, right? The price didn't go up, the price went down. And that's what's happening across the electricity sector.
Cynthia, any comments on just scalability of some of these concepts? Are you seeing it in the sustainability space? How is these concepts beginning to filter into and move into measurable outcomes in sustainability as you look at your management plans for the future?
Well, on our campus, we see energy efficiency lowering our demand for power, but it's still a very complex system to implement those changes, and I'm not talking so much on the technology, the retrofit technology, the light bulbs, et cetera. We've just about finished changing all the fluorescent light bulbs out now. We're going to have to start changing them to LEDs. And they were supposed to last us 7 years at least, the fluorescents. So, but, definitely there is a decrease, but there's also pressure to grow. And I don't think that's isolated to a university and the distresses we heard this morning, but there's a pressure to grow. There's a decrease, these smartphones and computers increase blood load demand as well. So there's sort of that rebound effect on energy that you have to deal with. And so I think it takes time, and you've got technicians who are engineers and such that are still in the pre-computer age that have to come up to speed, and the way we manage our energy has to change within institutions. So I think that's still something that we're, not just our university, other institutions are struggling with, and we talk about. And yes, as the younger generation comes through, they'll be more prepared to take that on, but we have to wait for that attrition. There's also on the sort of community side and residential side, just like for energy efficiency, not everybody pays their own utility bills. They're in big buildings, particularly those with the lowest income in public housing and such, so they have no incentive to engage in these real-time energy programs if they even understood what they are. For them, energy is very visible in the sense that they have to pay these bills. And these are the people, we just had a forum on the 1995 heat wave. These are the people that sometimes, those who did pay energy bills but were low income, couldn't afford to turn the air conditioning on and died. So it's a real issue of making it available to them and making it cheaper. And we still see many, many homes haven't been retrofit for energy efficiency. So to think that they're sort of going to jump into some kind of digital era is a little bit hard to see. I think we will need some intervention from not-for-profits to actually come in with the software, to come in with the education, why is it, appealing to their need to, their interest in saving money and reducing their costs to really get that sector of society. Yes, here on campus, here in this room, we all have that sort of that social contract that we're talking about still needs to serve, and I'm not sure, we don't want them to get left behind as we make.
So do one real quick data point.
Sure.
Really interesting information because we all want to grow. The Chicago economy over the last few years is growing at about 2.5% to 3%. So we're having economic growth. That's modest growth, but the economy is growing 2.5% to 3%. Electricity demand, what Commonwealth Edison sells, is declining about 1.2%. So in other words, there's about a 4% delta between growth and electricity demand. So what that really shows is that what's happening is we're growing, but we're using more gizmos and gadgets and so forth. But we're growing in a way in which more energy efficient. And part of that is it's money that businesses and others are saving. They're plowing back into the economy. But there's a disconnect now between growth and the increased use of, I'll just call it gizmos and gadgets. Cindy's saying more things that use electricity, and the amount of electricity that's actually being used. And that's because everything we use, lighting, heating, cooling, pumps, motors, are becoming more efficient, and that's attriting demand at a time that the economy is growing.
Well, and just getting back, though, on top of that, so weaving in some of the comments that Cynthia was getting at, where do you see, Cynthia, the barriers to access? Is it, in some respects, it isn't necessarily that the gizmos aren't available. They're available to a smaller part of the population, or maybe that's what you're positing. And that's my question. I guess a follow-up would be, what are the barriers to access so that greater efficiency, less demand on electricity may also be available to others that currently don't have access to that in this social contract?
I think it's just awareness and education. Again, as I said, most people we ask don't know what smart grid is in the first place, and we're asking on campus. So, really enhancing that.
But it sounds like you said incentives as well, too. Is that more of a basis of, because you said you have people that maybe don't understand, but then also they're not the ones paying the bill. And so
right. So the incentives are missing. Although there is clearly some work has been done by other ISIP fundies that are seeing that there's probably over 10% potential for savings through understanding how smart grid works and operates that way in those places where they can impact that. So that's pretty clear. And I think on the other hand, yes, the more affluent population may have an uptake of those technologies because they're fun, geeky, or whatever. But for the most part, they don't pay attention to their energy use until they can't power up their smartphone or their computer. And so really making energy more visible. And I think that was spoken about earlier today, too, in the session I was in. So how do we really talk about it? It's a complex market. We have choices about where we buy our power from, the regulation, the deregulation. And so you make those choices that may not allow you to participate in real-time power programs, et cetera. And even for somebody who, like me, who's versed in this, it's a challenge to take the time to sit down and figure out what to do. So whatever we do, we have to make it really easy and smooth for people to transition to that.
Some of it's ease, some of it's incentive, some of it's access. It's a combination of one. It's complicated. And maybe Saeed, as a person who thinks about the markets, who's constantly looking ahead and trying to identify what the market need is, do you have any comments around where's the demand? Where do we see the yearly uptake for these new types of technologies? I mean, in Howard's paper, he talks a lot about the leapfrog effect, where those that in other countries, they didn't need to rely on building infrastructure as cell phone technology came in. Is there something like that happening in clean tech as well?
So I had the privilege of coming from Jordan, and I don't know how many of you know Jordan, but we have a 99% electrified education side, but that part of the world, there's other examples. But I've also had the privilege of traveling to China, India, Europe, all over the place. And in my class, when I teach about solar energy, I show one figure that shows that there's 2 billion people in the world today without access to electricity. But we're not talking about uniforms. We're talking about gold. Let's think of it if you want social contract. So I tell my students there's 2 ways to think of it. Either say, oh my God, these poor people, how can we help them? Doctor Without Border, right? Or if you're an entrepreneur like me, the first thing that happens in your mind is ka-chink. This is 1/3 of the world population that don't have access to electricity. And look what happened 20 years ago. The reason the cell phone industry came to where it is today, not just in the U.S., in China in the 90s, when they were growing so fast, right now it's a different story, they could not keep up with the infrastructure bill. They couldn't because, building megas project takes 10 years and you could not wait. So Motorola, actually, which is a company you guys know, went to China and said, forget about landlines. We're going to leapfrog them with cell phones. And the rest is history. Today, if you see where solar energy is, you look everywhere. I travel in Jordan, in areas where there's shepherds in the desert. I go sometimes in India where there's no running water. In China, for you. But everybody has a cell phone, right? Everybody's in Facebook, right? Nobody gave them those, and they pay for it. By the way, it's $1 a day. They can go without food, without water, but that phone is charged. Solar, you look at where most of the solar growth is in areas that are remote, outside the grid. They're not waiting. There's 2 ways to look at it. Government has a role, and you has a role. But if you look at the fastest growth is where entrepreneurs, innovators have a problem to solve and have the will and the environment, the ecosystem that allow them to go and solve problems. So in Chicago, I would argue that the problem is not that we have people who don't have access to phones. The problem is if you have lack of access to capital, which a lot of business owners don't. GE, Siemens, and Westinghouse, they solved that problem 2 years ago for business owners. It's called the ESCO model. I don't know if you heard of it. Called Energy Service Model. They come in, they look at your building, you want LED, you want HVAC, you want whatever you want, insulation. They clearly say one condition, you pay me the same bill for 2 years and then it's yours. So if you leave technology and innovation in the right environment, ecosystem, regulation, like Howard's talking about, we will find solution. But I would always argue, let's look at this as business opportunities. Look at this as technology, as innovation, a challenge to our students, our innovators, to see how can we solve these social or technological problems.
And talk a little bit about the role of regulation and that barrier that creates, and regulated enterprises for that matter. In what way is that currently a barrier, and what changes that to reduce the friction of those with ideas to have a chance to get those new products into the marketplace?
First of all, what we saw in telecom, what we've seen in a lot of other fields, is monopolies fight to keep their monopolies because it's profitable, and the erosion of monopolies through competition leads to an erosion of revenues, and generally speaking, leads to an erosion of profit. And there's a question that's both regulatory and it's political. The regulatory question, the practical question is, go back a few years. If AT&T said to the people of this room, if you choose to buy a cell phone and give up your landline phone, AT&T will have less profit. How many of you would say, no, I'm going to keep my landline and not get a cell phone because I don't want AT&T's profitability to go down? How many politicians would stand up and say, sorry folks, no cell phones, keep your landline because we want to make sure AT&T's profits are protected? It almost never works to tell people you can't have choice and you can't take advantage of technologies that are coming into the market, which sort of reflecting comments by both Saeed and Cindy and you, John. The easier they are for people to do, the more widespread they are. If all the bulbs on the shelf are being sold as LEDs by GE, Philips, IKEA, Best Buy, and so forth, then it's not a matter of your level of sophistication or your age or your income level. You're buying a bulb, you're screwing it in. That's very easy. It's very fluid. You save money, you reduce pollution. So what we've seen is it almost never works to try to say, keep the profitability. So in the context here of electricity, there's almost certainly going to be a role, at least in the short, near, medium term, for Commonwealth Edison providing at the very least backup support. At some point, we get to what Saeed's talking about. Buildings have solar panels, batteries, they take care of their own. And there's very little need to tap back for existing power being generated by coal, natural gas, wind power, nuclear, coming through wires, and then going through Commonwealth Edison to John's home. The question, though, then is how do you price backup power? Because if I'm going to use the power, just me, and I'm going to be using ComEd all the time from whichever power purchaser generator, and you're going to be using it just for backup, probably you should pay a little bit more, right? Because I'm the steady customer, and you're the one who wants the opportunity to use it when you need it, but not have to pay for it all the time. But if you make that too expensive, then number one, what we saw what happened with landlines. If a landline is really inexpensive, most of us would have kept our landline. My guess is most of the people in the room don't have a landline. It becomes too expensive, then you don't get that backup power. Or more fundamentally, somebody else comes in, whether it's a competitor, an NRG or a Google or a distributed generator, and says, with the technology that you're both familiar with, and Cindy is too, we can do something with a small natural gas turbine. We can do something CHP, combined heat and power. We can give you backup, and we can do that cheaper than Commonwealth Edison. So there's sort of a natural price suppression on that, both because some people say if it's too expensive, I'm not going to do it, and because there are a lot of technologies coming in, batteries and otherwise, that provide that sort of community storage. That's the much more decentralized system we're moving to.
Do we have a policy framework in place that allows, or what would need to become to allow the type of innovation to get out to the market as quickly as possible? And maybe if I also kind of, in that context, ask Cynthia kind of, what are the things that you see on the horizon for you? What's driving your mindset around scouting for new technologies that are actually going to make an impact in the foreseeable future? Because you've got different timetables too, as I sense it. Some things are going to happen very quickly, other things are going to take a longer period of time. Can you help us think about, as you look at sustainability in your management plans, what innovation do you think will be coming next that will be readily implementable, that will make the kind of impact that you're talking about?
Well, I think in the near term, it is using technology with existing systems. For instance, we do have combined heat and power. How can we use that ability to predict when it's economical for us to power those plants more or power them down, buy off the grid, make forecasts with weather and demand on the market. So using data and technology for that would be a first step. And also those smart technologies that run buildings, so building automation systems and really getting those in buildings. Because even if you have an older system that you can control, when you won't use it, you're already saving a lot of energy. So just getting that happening through ESCOs, through these energy services contracts is a great way, and capital constrained, we're doing that now, and we should keep doing that. So having the funding mechanisms, having the opportunity to pilot things and then scale up is there's a lot of risk aversion within institutions to, at least public institutions, to change of that nature.
So I'm going to ask one more question to Saeed, but before I do, I want to mention to our audience that if you have a question, please write that question down on a card. There's individuals walking through providing access to those cards. Please feel free to ask questions, and we'll get to those momentarily. But Saeed, just turning the attention to further around the ecosystem that we refer to. We also kind of use Chicago as a backdrop. There's a lot of discussion around, obviously, the Internet of Things, and Chicago being, a smart city, a global city. The mayor's office being very focused around, providing access to data. Is Chicago and Illinois a place where this type of innovation will accelerate? Is it the right policy environment? Is it the right ecosystem? Are there venture capital firms? Are there entrepreneurs? Are there larger companies to sell some of these technologies to? Again, assuming there's a market, assuming there's access, is Chicago and Illinois the right place? If not, what needs to change? That's the first question. And the second is there a better place in the country to do this type of work?
So I will answer that, but first I just want to make a quick comment about regulation, which I will give the audience two examples. Howard probably knows that. There was a big push for something called the CAFE standard. I don't know how many of you know this, which is fuel efficiency for vehicle. The intention was to keep pushing the automotive industry to do better, and I think now it's 55 miles per gallon in Howard. 2025. So I'll tell you, 10 years we were talking about that when we wrote a paper on the PH, and they said it cannot be done. No way. And everybody was thinking, you're winning and losers. So the smart thing, the positive, did not say do this. He said, you just have to reach this. And if you look today at cars in the U.S., you see unbelievable technology innovation. Forget about electric. The internal combustion, the seat, these transmission technology controller, these cars now are over 30, 40 miles. Gasoline cars, smaller, lighter, pickup trucks that have 11 bodies. So I just want to say, I'm not a big fan of regulation because I'm for innovation, but there are two examples with RPS Renewable and CAFE that they put the frame in the ecosystem and they look and say, okay, do it. And oh my God, they're doing it now with all kinds of ways. So we're going to see that, and you can see that the U.S. energy import oil is actually, we produce now more than we need, because not just because of new exploration fracking, it's because the energy efficiency of the fleet is going higher. Go back about the...
Saeed, let me just triple down to Saeed. It's unfair, but sulfur dioxide that causes acid rain, just because now we're talking about the electric system. In 1990, during the Clean Air Act amendments, the sworn testimony of the industry, and I don't think this was the tobacco panel, okay? I don't think people were fabricating. But the consistent industry testimony was reducing sulfur dioxide that causes acid rain from coal plants would cost $2,000 to $3,000 per ton. Okay? And I really don't think people were getting up and pretending that, cigarettes don't cost cancer. I mean, that's what they thought it would be. What it turned out to cost is somewhere between $50 and $100 per ton through market mechanisms. And part of what happened was, as soon as this was monetized and the regulatory policy framework was in place, businesses looked for ways to do it better and cheaper. And instead of it being $2,000 to $3,000 a ton, it was in the $50 to $100 range. I mean, enormous savings.
So I'll go back to your question. So if you look at the ecosystem, that's why I'm Chicago. Chicago is a lovely place. The weather is a little bit, challenging.
9.5 months on
That's why we're tough, right? That's why we don't want to be softies in the Bay Area, right? But what we have here actually two great things. Our company has grown from 9 people to 45 in the last 9 years. We're hiring the brightest. If you look around Chicago, we have some of the best institutions, university labs, all kinds of stuff. And we have the lake, by the way, which, Clean Water Act, you guys, if you think about oil and all that, this is the next big fortune for the world, it's water. So Chicago, we have this unbelievable human talent and the water. But I would argue, and Howard and I knew each other for the last 15 years. There have been tremendous attempts, and John, probably you see that in Chicago everywhere, to create innovation and entrepreneurship around energy and make the argument that in the Midwest is the hub for clean tech. Ain't working. I'll tell you right now. And it's not because we don't have people. We are here, we're growing despite all the odds. My colleagues who moved to the west or to the east, they do much better. They're driving Teslas, they on vacation, retiring babies. No regrets. And what we have is, if you look at Chicago, it's not the lack of investment. We have the right ecosystem. Universities are trying their best to help entrepreneurs create incredible talents. But if you look at the investment community, they don't like to invest in stuff that takes some time to be a business. We have the Groupon, the IT, but when it comes to something that you need to build, I started this company in 2001. We sold the first product. We went in production in 2012 because it took us 10 years to invent, innovate, certify, and then get a product in the market. And that's the reality. People talk about Bill Gates and jobs. They think it happened right. It didn't. Building physical stuff takes time. You fail. We died and lived every week for the last 5 years. Now it's okay, right? But it's not. But we are the exception. I have a lot of good friends, smarter than me, better business models, over in the East and West Coast because they have people there. You sit with them over lunch, deals, over napkin, they wrote the terms, write the terms. This is not happening in Chicago. We've been lucky. We've had a lot of support, but that does not create the right ecosystem. Because I want competition. I want other people to come here in my business because then it's momentum. It's more force. Unfortunately, I don't see that in Chicago, and we're going to do much better for innovation, for entrepreneurship startups to make it a better place.
So I'm going to switch over to questions from the audience. First one really is directed toward the social contract. I'll pose it to the group. This individual is looking for quick thoughts on progress toward efficient utility delivery to urban areas with dwindling populations such as Cleveland, Detroit, Louisville. Any comments on that?
Move to Chicago.
Well, let's take this. First of all, Cleveland's an unusual city because Cleveland has both a municipal electric utility and a competing investor-owned utility. But look to a place like Detroit, which is radically reinventing itself. I think what you're going to see in places like Detroit are electricity delivered in very different ways than the Detroit of 40 years ago that had many more people, a lot of heavy industry in town. You're going to see it develop in ways that are more decentralized because there are pockets of redevelopment rather than the city as a whole. And it's really going to be an opportunity to see a lot of the more decentralized, small power generation, more distributed than beforehand, just because the city has vast areas. If people are familiar with Detroit, they're just vast areas that are vacant. So serving those areas with electricity, years past was happening. They won't be served now because there aren't people or businesses there. But the pockets that are growing are places that can probably be served sometimes more efficiently in a much more distributed way.
So I hear you say a lot of these new technologies could be piloted in some of these applications and tested and perhaps at the cutting edge.
Yep.
If I switch over to the next question, it seems to be a little bit more focused around policy and regulation. This questioner moved forward with. There are countless examples of government supporting and subsidizing big oil, gas, and coal to the detriment of public good and disturbing or distorting the market. So clean tech and better batteries may be disruptive, but are they disruptive enough to take on big oil, gas, and coal?
So, I just want to make sure, I'm a clean tech guy, I'm all for it. I don't like conspiracy theory stuff. Let's cut it off. There are things that you can quantify, but I will tell you today, I'm for clean tech, and I would argue with anybody that you cannot run the world or any major city on only renewable energy and batteries. You cannot. The reality is you need base load, and whether we like it or not, is going to be one of those either pick your poison, coal, nuclear, natural gas. So, because renewable energy by nature is intermittent. You see the sun during the day, it's not at night, when it blows. Even with batteries, with the best batteries and technology, it's not going to serve, it's not going to be economically and sustainable for growth. So we got to live with that. Now, having said that, I always say level the playing field. I don't ask for a handout, but I say level the playing field. And the way you do that, you monetize the social impact. So the best way to do it, if you're going to help the industry, there's a term that's called carbon credit or carbon trading that's been floating around for years now. And it's a way to monetize these impacts by creating a market value for emissions. So if you're going to emit, that's fine, do your business, but I'm going to charge you for that. And if you use stolen batteries, you can sell those. Once you monetize that, you create a marketplace for it, and it's not easy. They tried in Chicago here. There was a company that did that and failed because the law did not catch up. A company now doing that. BP, for example, is doing it. But ultimately, you cannot just, cry about subsidies and all that. Because actually, I will tell you this, I'm from the Middle East. I came here 20 years ago. In that part of the world, every freaking 5 years we have a war. Why? Because it's beautiful weather there. It's a desert, right? It's because of oil. And I want the U.S. to be off of oil, and one of them is exploration. And I'm a chemical engineer, I'm for the environment, but the U.S. is seeing a revolution in energy today that's going to decrease our import of energy for 1 or 2% for the next 20 years because of both efficiency and exploration. And that's good. So let's just try to level the playing field through carbon mechanism, but not worry too much about conspiracy theories.
Here's where policy, I think, John, will drive us. First of all, I agree with Saeed, we'll need some base load, but we'll need much less. Joe Dominguez, who's the Senior Vice President of Exelon, and I have been on a couple of panels together, and we agree around the following statement. Everybody from whether it's the oil, gas, coal, nuclear, wind, solar pieces of the energy industry, everybody has a very elegant rationale for why their incentive is targeted and very well justified, and why everybody else's is a completely unprincipled subsidy. So you have to look at a system. The Woodrow Wilson Center did a study of who got how much subsidy, and the conclusion of it was that the largest subsidies go to foreign oil, which makes absolutely no sense. I mean, we have a tax code that is just jam-packed with subsidies from various energy sources, and I tend to, frankly, be more aligned with the Cato Institute approach of just eliminate the subsidies across the board. The reality of being able to do that is, well, Peter Pan isn't going to wave a wand and make that happen, okay? So what we have to do, or should be doing for the future, is phasing out the subsidies that have been embedded in the tax code for many, many years for old technologies that were designed or justified at the beginning as incentivizing, providing a nudge, or spurring certain new technologies to come in, but now 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, they're old technologies. Where we ought to use incentives is to give a nudge to newer technologies coming in and use the ending of the older subsidies to help support moving us forward with new technology, old versus new.
So this person asks, they skimmed through a few articles and they've been told at the same time that with regards to Tesla, there is some skepticism about how green the technology really is. And so the question is, if it's not green, what are the alternatives?
I didn't read these papers. I don't know what does that mean, honestly.
The life cycle of the process.
Yeah, I teach in university. There are people who wrote papers about photovoltaic that consumes it. It's all nonsense. There's studies, environmental material science, that looks at all these technology. It's called cradle to grave life cycle analysis. Electric cars actually have less moving parts, have less pieces, and because they run on electricity, you can make the electricity from solar. So they pay for themselves, both in energy pollution to make the parts and themselves in less than 3 years. This is all documented there's people skeptic about everything, so I don't know. But I wouldn't, it's the same as climate change debate. Honestly, I don't know where this is coming from.
Another question around the social contract and its interplay with regulation. So in the morning, this questioner posits regulation, the conclusion is regulation is necessary to protect the environment. In the afternoon, we're hearing that regulation may get in the way of innovation. Both are obviously true. How do we develop a rhetoric around regulation that allows for sensible discussion around the role of regulation in the social contract?
The question isn't regulation good or bad. I mean, we're at a university. There's all sorts of interesting debates you can have in the classroom and talk about we ought to deregulate everything or we ought to regulate everything. Okay? I teach at a law school, and those are fun questions around the seminar table. The question when you're looking at regulation is, what's the purpose? Where are you protecting or preserving, if you will, a public good? Right? So when it comes to, for example, water pollution of Lake Michigan, Saeed talked, we have a tremendous economic bounty here in Chicago. We sit on next to the largest freshwater body in the world, 22% of the world's freshwater, 42 million people get their drinking water supply from the Great Lakes. And if I don't pollute and Cindy doesn't pollute, but Saeed Inc. pollutes, I should not the other way. If Saeed and Cindy don't, but I do, the water gets contaminated and people in this room can't drink it. There's a public good there that needs to be protected and a level playing field that needs to operate. That's a place where regulation is important and makes sense. The other piece in what's happening here is technology is beginning to make a more monopoly system. It certainly happened in telecom, make it relatively extinct so that you have much more competition. And when it comes to cell phones, there are half a dozen different cell phone companies that give us offers for different phones and different pricing and so forth. So there's regulation that's needed to protect the common good, and there's regulation that gets in the way of competition and choice. And those are two very, very different things.
So we only have 5 more minutes left. I'm going to ask the panelists one more closing question, but before I do, I want to make sure that everyone knows that you're invited to the closing keynote session in the main room following our presentation on our panel. So we hope to see you there. So in closing, I'm going to ask each of you to think about this question in light of the following constituencies. So Saeed, when I ask the question, I'd like you to think about it in terms of what you would say to entrepreneurs and students. Cynthia, I'd like you to think about it in the context of large enterprises, sustainability officers, and what's on their mind and what the future looks like. And Howard, what would you say to policymakers as well as public utilities in answering this question? And we'll start with Saeed. What is your vision for the next 10 years as to where we're headed in the clean tech field?
So I work with Dean Nelson, the college engineer, on an initiative for engineering and entrepreneurship. And my challenge, I talk to the student organization, and I'm trying to convince them to make a revolution because university is very hard to change. And which they're supposed to be the force of change, but sometimes very hard to change. So my concept is simple. If you believe in clean tech, and if you have something you're passionate about, do it and think of one thing. Don't wait for someone to give you a job. Go and create a job for you and your friends, you and the community. It's the best time now for clean tech. There's a lot going on, especially in Chicago right now. I complain a little bit, but this is the best environment. And my advice to everybody, when I was a student, we used to think, okay, how can I land a job with BP or big company? The world is changing. It's much more fun. It's much more innovative. And for God's sake, it's nice to take risks when you have kids and have a wife and all that. So that's all I'm saying. Just cut the chains and go create something new.
I think for institutions, the challenge is really to engage people at all levels to understand why this is important, and that depends on what they value. So addressing this through accomplishing their mission, and being able to speak that language. So whether it is an economic or social good that they're trying to accomplish, that you can do that. In particular, with higher ed, I would sort of build on this and say that we want our, I envision in 10 years that every student who leaves this institution would understand about sustainability, energy systems, and would take that to wherever they go, in whatever work, whether it's policy, engineering, teaching, healthcare, and just understand that they have to be thinking about this in their work.
What I would say to policymakers and utilities and others who play in the field, the technology is accelerating very, very fast, and that, of course, isn't going to be put back in the barn. People are going to have more choices, more different services. There's a paradigm shift, the transformation that we've all been talking about. Where is regulation essential to protect the public good? Regulation isn't. What should be open to competition and choice? And for the areas that are open to competition and choice, various businesses will participate in that market. Some will make money, some won't. But that's a competitive market, for Lord's sakes. Don't subsidize the losers. Let companies that play in a competitive market compete where they're going to be both winners and losers, and then on to move forward. Finally on that, look what happened in telecom, because it's not a bad example. Everybody knows Verizon, the wireless company. What happened with Verizon is Verizon owned both landline and wireless. They made a choice. They chose to sell off the landline and become a wireless company. And you sit there today and you say, like, duh. Smart move, guys, of course. But the bells around the country, as Warren Levy, who's a telecommunications specialist, knows, made very, very different choices. Some of them worked out very well. Some of them didn't. And the role of the regulators and the policymakers is to let that work on the competitive side of the market. And the role for utilities is to decide which places they want to play in which way. And then either succeed and say, made the right choice, or if they don't succeed, that's what happens in a competitive market.
So I'd like to thank the audience for your great participation, the questions, being here today. And I'd also like to get a round of applause for an outstanding panel.